Hello, this is Kade, and it is day 5 of the IAE 2952, and today it is Anvil Day, which means it's finally an interesting mixed bag of ships in regards to value for money and usabilities, because Anvil is one of the more interesting manufacturers in that regard. Like before, let's just quickly take a look at the holo display, and then we'll move on into more detail. Let's start with the holo suites. Downstairs, we have the Centurion and Ballista. My usual thing is with ground vehicles, I don't recommend them. They're too expensive for what they offer, in my opinion, and the Centurion and Ballista are no different. If you really want to get one of these two, however, I would recommend the Centurion over the Ballista, because the Centurion, being a gun-based platform, has just a much longer endurance on station, and the Ballista, of course, once it's out of missiles, it's out of missiles. The Crucible, of course, still in concept. Easy recommendation for that ship. It's going to be very, very useful for anybody that operates a fleet of smaller ships. So whether running a mining operation with a whole bunch of prospectors, or you're running your combat fleet with your fighters, this is one of the great ships to just keep them patched up and going while you're out in the more deep areas of space. The Liberator is, in my opinion, too expensive for what it does, because it is in the end just a glorified transport ship. The only difference is it transports ships around the place, but it is limited to fighter-sized ships and of course ground vehicles as well, up to including the tanks. But it's at a really, really steep price tag, which to me doesn't make it a worthwhile purchase. The Legionnaire, the dedicated boarding ship, I think it is extraordinarily niche of a ship. However, if this is something that you plan to be doing, like you're running a mercenary organization or a pirate organization, this is probably a ship you still want to have in your fleet despite everything else, because it does offer you that capability in a way that no other ship will be able to offer it to you. And we have a really full central hull here. Starting off with the Terrapin. The Terrapin, of course, is a dedicated survey ship, scanning ship, stuff like that. I foresee these things to be relatively useful coming in the future, but we really need to see how it's gonna play out. Which means that for the moment, it doesn't really do anything in game. It comes in at a relatively high price tag. It is already released, it is flight ready, so you can just pick it up whenever the gameplay actually comes into effect. So until that moment in time, I would not recommend acquiring it. The Gladiator is in a bit of a tough spot, very honestly. It's not doing very well. When it comes to like being a missile slinger, there are just better options out there. It's relatively sluggish, it's not too survivable, it lacks in gunpowder. It's really in a space where it probably needs some looking at and some TLC. What I would personally love to see what they do is just give it like one externally mounted, much larger torpedo that it carries, so it's just a single shot. That would be a really cool sort of concept to play around with. Or maybe even make it almost like a dive bomber style ship, so instead of using missiles, say we use rockets. That could make it for a very interesting concept, but as it stands right now, not recommended. Arrow, the ultimate, no questions about it, meta level light fighter in the game. There's not a better one out there. It is the one fighter that is used by almost anybody that wants to be the most competitive they can be, so by all means. If you want to get into combat, you want to get the best ships out there right away, grab the Arrow. Just keep in mind, it requires a good pilot. The Carrack, the Carrack is the Carrack. Exploration ship, of course, the price is relatively steep these days at 600. But it is a large ship. It also can be used for cargo hauling quite effectively in the first, because it brings along those capital grade shields, which means it's a lot more survivable than the dedicated cargo haulers, like for example the Caterpillar or the C2. Both of those ships, of course, are substantially cheaper than the Carrack is, but of course the main goal for the Carrack is going to be this large exploration ship, and I think it is a really cool ship to have around. So while it is expensive, it is one of the ships that I can recommend acquiring if you're into that level of gameplay. Then we're running into the Hurricane. The Hurricane is the go-to heavy fighter out there. It is tiny, which is of course a massive advantage. It brings a lot of firepower with that turret, but it is indeed a two-man ship. So if you're flying alone, there's no point in it. If you want to fly with two people and you want to do bounty missions, PvP, the Hurricane is extremely dangerous and extremely capable. The Hawk was a dedicated bounty hunting ship. It brings a lot of size 1 weapons. And right now I think it's a little bit in a tricky spot. It's not really all that great. It's not a ship that I would personally recommend when it comes down to going around currently in the verse. So maybe in the future, but right now not worth acquiring. The C8X Pisces, I mean it is the Pisces, it is just a shuttlecraft and it's one of my favorite ships in the game personally. And I can always recommend them because these things are going to be useful until the end of time. It doesn't matter whether you're flying alone or you're flying in the largest organizations out there. These ships are small, they're flexible, and they can be used in many things. And of course, CRG understood that as well, and they released the C8R Pisces, the rescue version. So this is your proper like small scale ambulance. And because it is so small, it can fly into caves, into large wrecks. It can get about anywhere where none of the other medical ships really can get to. And at a price of 65 for store credit version of the C8R Pisces, it is a very strong recommendation. It is cheaper. 2 of these are cheaper than a single Cutlass Red. And I think honestly the capability from the Pisces is going to be more flexible and more useful than the Cutty Red will be in most scenarios. I think for the medical gameplay wise, the upgrade path is really going to be from Pisces and up to the Apollo series from RSI. Then we have the Hornet series of the F7 versions, of course, in many different variations. It is fairly simple when it comes down to the F7 Hornets. It is just get yourself either a standard Hornet or a Super Hornet, but then again, just get a standard Hornet because you want to probably be flying this thing solo. You don't get a lot of value flying the Super Hornet with 2 people. And you can get all of the Super Hornet equipment, buy that and put it on a standard Hornet. So when it comes to the F7 Hornet series, you just buy the F7C Hornet and that's the end of it. Ignore all the other variations. They're not worth having. End of story. Down here we have the Spartan. Honestly, what was the Spartan again? I honestly need to check. Sometimes, oh yeah, that was of course, that's the APC version of the ground vehicle. Yeah, definitely avoid that one. It's a ground vehicle. The F8 Lightning, very simply put, you cannot buy it. You just get access to one if you spend more than $10,000, which is of course something I will not recommend to anybody to do. If you have that kind of disposable income, by all means. Or if you have been somebody like me who's been with the project since the beginning, so over time you are spending, you may actually be getting close to it. But that's the only way you're gonna get one. There are some rumors that maybe you are allowed to buy one in-game after you complete Squadron 42, but who knows? I'm not going to put my money on that for sure. And then we have the Valkyrie. I mean, the dropship and the most capable of all the dropships. It comes in at a reasonably high price tag, and of course it is very limited to that one role being a dropship. But if you're running a PMC style organization, you're going to be wanting a Valkyrie. It is relatively simple. It's just the one ship that you're going to be needing if you want to be capable of performing proper level drops with a good number of people to really get them into action. So in that aspect, it is definitely a ship we can recommend. So I think we're gonna do it like yesterday. We'll start at the holotables downstairs and then we go up into the main hall. And we just make the same circle as we started the short version. So yeah, actually not that many holes in there, but like the Anvil lineup is really one of the more interesting ones. They are very much focused, of course, on their combat stuff, but then also all the things that get around the combat stuff. And that just makes it really interesting. I'll take a quick look at the ground vehicles this time. Because like you can say a lot of things, like this thing does look really amazing. And I also suspect it will be reasonably effective against personnel. But right now the main issue that the ground vehicles have, of course, they are A, too expensive, and B, they are way too vulnerable. So right now they just are not in a good place, and I think that's something that the balance will have to be done after the new flight model comes in, think once the new flight model is in and they're happy with that, then they can balance how they're going to interact with the ground vehicles. So until then, the ground vehicles are probably going to remain in a rather poor state. The Crucible, so that's your mobile repair platform. As I said, this ship is going to be really, really useful for almost any level of org. That said, a very large scale of org may bring different ships to the table which can perform this role on their own as well. Like I suspect that IAE Idris will be very much capable of patching up the ships that are landed in its hangar bay and things like that. So there's going to be at some point a breaking point where, okay, maybe this ship is not going to be as useful, but definitely for smaller, medium scale organizations, whether you're running deep space mining operations or you're running combat operations, this ship is going to be very useful to have around. Maybe you only need one, maybe you need two. You won't need that many because unless you're running really a combat operation, but then if you need to be fixing up so much, then maybe you need to reconsider your tactics anyway. But by all means, it is a good ship to have around. You can also, of course, fly one of these and you're going to be with a very small number of people. You're going to be like playing like a search and rescue style operation maybe, or just like a surfacing platform. You combine it with a Aegis, I think that's the Anvil or something like that. That's the refuel ship and the repair ship in space. You can combine those things and you can make a small organization that's more like your AA in space, like your auto assistance, whatever it's really called. I always forget. AAA, I don't know. You know what I'm getting on that. Yeah, of course, the transport ship. People are like, oh, it's a carrier, and it's like, it's a carrier in the sense that it carries stuff, but it is really a transport ship. Now, the problem for me is not that it is a transport ship and the role that it does. For me, the problem it really comes down to the price. I think it's too expensive for what it does. And that's just my opinion. It is relatively limited in the role. I think it should have been at least like $100 cheaper. Then it would have been actually a fairly reasonable ship to have, especially when you get into the larger scale of organizations, because this ship will allow you to move assets around, and moving assets around is going to be quite important in Star Citizen. You do not want to be flying your fighters over through, wormhole after, or jump point after jump point after jump point through system after system after system, because you need to be refueling all the damn time. You're putting a lot of wear and tear on a fighter frame for no reason at all, because they're not designed to be operated at long distances. This is the kind of ship that allows you to be like, okay, let's load up a bunch of stuff, fly it over to our area of operations, and we can deposit it there. Now, of course, if you're running a large organization, maybe even a medium level organization, and you have access to ships like the Kraken, that will just do the same sort of job. And at that point, value wise, the Kraken is actually starting to look more appealing, in my opinion, than this ship will do, because the Kraken will also be something that you want to have in the thick of action. And this is definitely one of those ships where it's like, no, I do not want people to shoot at me. It is not designed to be shot at. It's not designed to be in the thick of the operations. Much like a modern day aircraft carrier, they want to be staying well out of range of anything that could potentially be a danger to them, because their firepower comes in the fact of the fighters that they are carrying on board. So you could use this ship in such a similar role. Maybe if you're in a smaller organization, you want to move them around. But I think that my main issue is just the price point. So hard for me to recommend it just on that basis alone, sadly. And then we have the Legionnaire dedicated boarding ship. I pretty much said it in the short one because it's such a niche ship. It does one thing and one thing only. If you're running an organization that needs a level of capability, you need a ship. Simple as that. Beyond that, really not a ship that you're going to be having. So this is probably a ship you're looking at least a medium level organization that's going to be using this, because it's going to need to be escorted, so you're going to have quite a few other assets on the field just in order to do this kind of a job. So keep that one in mind. Don't acquire it if you're just with a few people, because you're not going to get a good value out of it. Because you're flying this thing solo against anybody, they're probably just going to shoot you out of the sky before you get anywhere near them. As well, of course, it's a boarding ship, it's not a combat ship in that regard. So yeah, already a max pack of course there. A very easy recommendation, the Crucible, hard one for the Legionnaire, and a very niche one. Or Legionnaire, I always keep those ships around. You know, the Carrier, hard one, and the Boarding ship is a good one. The Terrapin. Right now it is pretty darn useless. And that's just the simple fact of it. The gameplay for this ship still needs to be developed. And because of that, and because it doesn't do really anything else, because it is a very niche ship, I do not recommend you to acquire this ship at all. It just doesn't do anything else. So you're not going to be enjoying your time much with this ship. The only thing you could use it for is like transporting yourself to bunkers, but then again there are cheaper and better options for it. I will say that design wise I do still really like this ship. It is just a really chunky little ship. And these quad engine pods on the sides just look really cool. Gladiator, yeah, as we said, it is in a really tough spot. Really, really tough spot. It is just doing nothing special, really. Like, yes, you bring some larger missiles to the table, but generally at that point, if you need larger missiles, yeah, you bring larger ships to deliver the punch. Really, it's like, it's just a tricky place to be at, and that's why I said I think this thing could shine if they change it to a dumb munitions firing ship, because that way you can get away with it giving it a lot more firepower, but it would require a lot more skill to land that firepower, and that could actually make this a viable and also dangerous ship to have around in the verse. But as it stands, it just gets outshone, and it's not really a ship that I would recommend for anybody at all, like whether you're solo, large organizations. It doesn't do anything good, and that's just really an issue, because if you wanted to have something that does a lot of things alright, then this thing just gets outshone by a Hornet. Like, literally just get a Hornet. Like, you don't have the same size missiles, but you bring enough gun firepower to deal with whatever this thing would deal with the missiles anyway. It may just take you slightly longer, but then you don't need to reload after you're done with your one engagement. You just go to the next one. The Arrow. I mean, yeah, as I said, this is the meta fighter still. A really small profile. It is very nimble. It brings plenty of firepower to the table. It does require a good pilot because it is very squishy. So if you're going to take your hits, you're going to be going down relatively quickly. But yeah, if you want to learn to fly the best current meta ship, this is going to be it. Of course, if the flight model will change and things may change around, we'll have to see. But as it stands, this is a really good ship to have, whether you're a solo pilot, or of course if you're operating in a larger level organization. Like, you're going to be needing, especially in your large organization levels, you're going to be using a mixed fleet of fighters most likely. On a medium level organization, the smaller ones, you probably are more often looking at like actual medium level fighters. So because those are the flexible option. But for your large organization, you're probably going to be running a mix of light and heavy fighters, because they give you the best combination of those capabilities without the inherent downsides that are to a medium fighter, which does both those roles but not as good. That's of course a nice thing about being scaled. Like I said before, the more you scale up, the more you specialize. The Carrack, I mean, it is a well-known one. It is a chunky girl these days, of course. But it's just a really capable ship. It is fun to fly. You don't need too much crew actually to have fun with it right now. But it is a ship that can easily be run for, 3 to 5 players and upwards. I think it's also a great ship if you want to play with a smaller number of people. Like, you just want to play with yourself and a couple of friends, and you just want to go out there in the first. This is one of those ships that really does that quite well. And if you add one of these new medical places on top of in the landing bay, you also can do some search and rescue operations. It is a very nice all-around platform in that regard. So while it does come in at this reasonably steep price tag, it does bring a lot to the table for that money that you're going to be spending. And right now in the verse, as I said, it's very capable in combat. With the turrets, they're not as powerful as a lot of other turrets, but they're powerful enough to deal with any of the PvE level combat. And it is all a really strong cargo hauler, and you can use it, of course. You can load some ground vehicles inside, so you can do a lot of things with it already. And when the full exploration gameplay comes in, of course, you can really go out there into the depths of space and just be like, yeah, you can leave us alone for a while. Bye. So yeah, Carrack, easy recommendation, always. Now, the Rescue Pisces version, of course, yeah, I mean, by all means, $65 for an ambulance ship. It's just really, really good value. And it's going to give you something that's going to be useful for almost any level of organization. That said, it's not a ship for like a 2-person crew, because for that I think it's just going to be too short-legged. But right now in the verse, probably it could even still work. So if you just like you and your friend and you just want to be like rescuing people from bunkers where they've been shut down, then you can, by all means, you can grab one of these things. But I think honestly, if you want to do that, you want to go with a slightly larger crew. And ideally, like if you can park this set in a Carrack, you can also have some people like with a full-on ground team, but you can actually extract people from the bunker, deal with the NPCs inside. So it is very, very nice of a ship. I could just like, yeah, by all means, get one of these things in your fleet. It doesn't matter how large your organization is. These ships will always find a value because an ambulance is an ambulance. The Hawk, as I said, it's just, yeah, not in the greatest place right now. It also has an issue, of course, that it is a very large profile of a ship. And larger profile ships, of course, always have an inherent disadvantage, as in that they're just taking more hits because they are easier to hit because they're larger. And it doesn't bring much else to the table. Of course, it has like supposed to get like the spots for like bounties and yada yada yada, but again, none of that is implemented yet. So right now, no point getting it, and it's flight ready. So whenever its capabilities become useful to a degree that it becomes worth buying, you can simply buy it. So yeah, nothing to worry about now. And of course the Hurricane, I mean, we talked about it, it is the absolute king of the heavy fighters. It is again a very, very small level platform. Like, this is like roughly the surface area of even less than a Saber. When you just look at it, and it just brings so gosh darn much power to the field. So yeah, if you want to have fun with yourself and a friend doing combat operations, by all means, get yourself this ship. Nothing else will get even close to it. And it's not even all that expensive for being a heavy fighter. So yeah, really good buy if you want to have some fun just blowing stuff up. And it will blow up a lot of stuff, whether it's PvE or PvP combat. That thing is going to definitely shine. Let's go ahead and take a look at the vulnerable Hornets. I'll also explain the reason as to why not all of those are all that great to have. Now here we go. All of our Hornets. Now of course we have in the back there the version 2 or something, I believe, that they want to upgrade these things to. I'm not sure what the whole idea was, or maybe that's still with the there's also like the old military style kit that they sold at some point. Yeah, in the end, like, you just buy the base model Hornet here, like, because it's simply the best buy. And the equipment, as I said, like, you can buy all of the equipment from the Super and just throw it on the standard Hornet and off you go. And again, like here, the Wildfire is like, yeah, we put on some different stuff, and just like, yeah, but again, you're paying more, but you can do that in game anyway. And all of these stock loadouts, you're going to be changing most of the time, regardless. So, really, buy yourself a stock Hornet. I think this was the tracker. Well, there's one over there. We've got a tracker and a ghost, and the tracker brings that radar dish. Again, it doesn't really do anything right now, so you probably want to have a turret, so you want to have a standard Hornet. The Ghost brings stealth gameplay. Stealth gameplay doesn't do anything right now, so again, you want to have a stock Hornet. The Super Hornet brings you, that allows you, oh, you can put 2 people in there, but it doesn't give you really any added benefit or value when it comes to flying a Hornet, because like at this level of a fighter, turret gunner is not really required all that much, so yeah. Get yourself stock one, and this is then the F7A, so that's the military style of Hornet, the Mark II. So I guess this is what the style package will change to. But yeah, you cannot buy this one. You can just look at it and say, ooh, it looks pretty. And it does. Like, no point about it. Like, it comes down to it. These are, of course, medium fighters. But the Hornet has that additional flexibility that it runs in most setups, or even in a lot of setups, you can run a lot of gimbaled weapons on it without losing too much of your firepower. And especially for beginner pilots, it makes it a lot easier to use. But it's also very powerful when it comes to a mouse and keyboard player, because they don't need to point their entire ship at you, so they can actually maneuver their ship in a different direction and still keep their firepower on target. There's really always something to be said for gimbal setups on ships that actually have good wide ranges of where the gimbals can actually gimbal to. Which is of course the reason you don't go gimbaled on the Sabre, because those weapons are far too locked in. Now for the last offerings of the day, the Spartan, I mean it's a grind APC, it is utterly pointless, don't buy it. And the F8 Lightning, of course, well, you cannot buy it. And even those who spent the 10k, you'll be like, have it in your hangar on the webpage, but you're not gonna get it in game until after Squadron 42 has been released. Now that said, is this a ship gonna be worth having when it comes out? Whoa, most definitely. Like, this thing packs a absurd amount of firepower for a single pilot to control. When it comes to heavy fighters, this is gonna probably be one of the kings, and especially for heavy carrier-based fighters. So if you wanna have a longer range fighter, you're probably still gonna be sticking with the Vanguard from Aegis, because they have the long legs, which this thing will most definitely lack. But when it comes to raw combat performance, this thing is going to be outshining just about anything else that we currently know about. There's a reason, of course, the Navy is changing upwards to this ship. And it makes sense a lot, like, again, it's in fleet combat. It doesn't matter if you're individually less maneuverable, because there are other people around you which will compensate for that fact. Because if somebody gets on your tail, it's the job of somebody else to get them off your tail again. It's going to be this is going to be like the mainstay heavy duty hitter for the Navy, and also for a lot of player-based organizations, I think, especially if you have carrying capabilities. Like, if you have an Idris, probably be wanting to be loading up on these things. I'll probably use mine on the Odyssey, actually, because that gives an exploration ship like that a really heavy bit of firepower in case somebody wants to come knocking. So that's also something you can look at when it comes to that regard. And then finally, the good old Valkyrie, the dropship. It's not a cheap ship, but honestly, a lot of people say it's not great value. I kind of disagree, because when you look at what it does as a dropship compared also to the other things out there, yeah, there's just nothing else really that matches the capabilities of this ship. It just does its job really well. It is reasonably survivable. It has enough firepower to, like, try and secure your landing area for a bit as you drop down. Of course, in the end, you have to remember, these are not lingering combat ships. They're drop ships. Their duty is to get down, deposit their cargo, be that people, vehicles, and whatever, and then get the hell out of there again. They're not supposed to stay, because that's not what they're designed to do. The weapon system that they have on there are purely there to try and clear landing area and deal with anything that is there. Maybe there's some light air, some vehicles, and they can blast those away to make sure that the troops getting out of there are going to be completely safe. So yeah, if you're running a PMC style organization at least a medium level, because this ship will need different support assets, this is definitely a ship you want to have in your fleet. And with that, we have covered Anvil, which is, of course, primarily, as we said, they are really focused around their we are here to fight war, and we bring along some stuff to support that level of operations that we're doing. So combat, and everything that supports combat, whether that is transport, medical evacuations, and repair and refueling operations. So in that regard, like, if you want to do a full-on combat organization, you can almost make an entire fleet lineup from Anvil ships alone, which is really kind of cool. Of course, the downside is that when you're not running combat operations, most of their ships are going to be not that appealing to you. But then again, like I said, you always want to have some level of firepower regardless of the job of your organization, because you want to have a means to defend yourself against a reasonable threat. With that all said, I hope this has been informative. Once again, maybe inform some of your buying decisions when it comes to the ships in game. I'd like to thank you very much for watching, and we will see each other again tomorrow. Bye bye.